A friend recently told me that his college-age son was applying to college, and on the application where it asked him to select his gender, there were 30 different options. And one of them wasn't male. Now, does being a man really have to be this complicated? I don't think that it does, but it's time that we talk about it. Let's dive in. All right, men, welcome to the Manhood Tribes show. My name is Don Ross. I'm your host, and I am so glad that you are here joining in today because we're going to talk about what we really need to talk about if we're going to do a show about manhood. We're just going to simply try to answer the question, what is a man? Now, the fact that we even have to ask that question just reveals that our culture is in a really wonky place when it comes to the whole idea of gender and manhood and masculinity, and there is so much confusion around that topic right now. We want to try to bring some clarity to it, some simplicity, and to just kind of return to the idea that being a man really shouldn't be this confusing. It really shouldn't be this complicated. Half of the world's population has done it for most of history without much problem. It's really only been kind of recently in our modern era in the West that we have had so much confusion over the idea of what it means to be a man. So we want to try to bring some clarity to that today. But let me just say there's really kind of two things going on in our culture, and I want to make it clear what it is that we're trying to address today. Okay, at one level of our culture, there's really kind of this wrestling over what is it to actually be a man that has to do with the whole idea of gender, like the biological, psychological idea of gender. And, you know, like those are the kinds of things that we would think kind of simply boil down to just like, you have a penis, and so that means that you're a man. Like, it ought to be that basic, but it really isn't in our culture right now. And I want to say that's actually not the part of the debate that we want to try to address, frankly, because it really is just as simple as boys have a penis, girls have a vagina. Okay, we're just back to biology 101, and let's get it straight. So we're going to kind of set that side of the debate aside, because what I want to focus on is the other side of the debate, which is more existential. Kind of the idea of what does it mean to be a man? And this is the more kind of like internal idea of, okay, I get what it means to be male, and as I get older as a male, that in some sense makes me a man. But what does it really mean to be a man in the weighty sense of the term? How do I know that I am a man as compared to a boy? Or how do I know that I am a man as compared to anything that would be less than that? How do I know that I am worthy of the word man? How do I know that that is actually something that belongs to me? And this is, I think, the thing that most men are wrestling with. Some men are wrestling with that kind of first half of the debate of really like the biological side of what is it, what's the gender male really all about? And if that's you, hey, I want to be empathetic to that. I understand that that is super confusing in our culture right now. And if you are wrestling with that, I understand that that's a real struggle. So I don't want to belittle it because I know there are many of you guys out there that are wrestling with that. But I think what far more men are really struggling with in our culture right now, that's even kind of harder to talk about for guys, is what does it mean to be a man, and how do I actually know if I am one? So I will say that as a man, I went through this very same struggle in my early 20s. So I remember graduating from college and kind of launching out into the world, getting my first job, and just kind of being at a place in my life where I was sort of like, okay, I've followed the path. I've kind of done all of the steps. Like I'm launching into adulthood. But really the question kind of started to nag me. Almost, it just sort of popped up out of nowhere of like, am I a man? Like I've done all the things that I'm supposed to do, but am I a man? Like, how would I know that I am one? What are the markers at this point in my life that would actually tell me, yes, I've arrived at manhood and I'm deserving of the title? I didn't know. And I felt really confused and conflicted over the fact that I didn't know. And I think even at that stage in our culture, there was starting to be some confusion around that, not nearly as much as there is now. But there is plenty, I think, of angst within men over trying to really figure this idea out of what does it mean to be a man and how do I know if I actually am one? How would we define what it means to be a man? And frankly, is it even definable? Can we really put a definition to the term in a way that makes sense and that people can agree upon? So here at Manhood Tribes, obviously, the show is called Manhood Tribes. We're going to talk about manhood. And if we're going to do that, we need to have some clear ideas and clear thoughts around it in order to be able to help you guys to say with confidence, yes, I am a man, or here's how I know that I'm a man, or here's how I'm growing and getting better as a man. All of those things are possible. So we do want to bring some clarity to it. But let's talk about some of the ways in which our culture does try to define manhood that we are going to reject. Okay, so let's talk about what being a man really isn't, and that may help us to get to a place where we can get some clarity around what it is. Now, I'm going to say before I start into this, some of these definitions are bad and they're worthy of just rejecting out of hand. Some of these definitions aren't so bad, and they do get us kind of closer to the truth, but for our purposes here at Manhood Tribes, we're going to say that's not the way that we want to go. I'm going to explain a little bit about what that means and why I'm making those choices so that I can help you kind of understand when we do get to some clear ideas why we're going the way that we're going. Okay, but let's start in a place that I think is pretty obviously not the route that we want to go. If you were to just get onto YouTube today and start asking YouTube some questions about what is a man or what does it mean to be a man, you are likely going to get a whole host of videos that are going to tell you that being a man has a lot to do with muscles and money and sex. Right? It really is about a lot of the things that our culture would kind of call toxic masculinity. It's about the chauvinistic kind of machismo side of manhood that's really just about accumulating and grandizing yourself. So accumulating money, accumulating possessions, accumulating a body count, right? That's what it's being called now, to talk about how many people you've slept with. Accumulating all of these things and then doing all of the things to the buzzword now is to optimize yourself as a man, right? And that essentially means some things like, having the best body that you possibly can, making sure that your biceps are huge, your abs are toned, you're rocking a six pack, you've got the perfect kind of model style hair, anything and everything to sort of optimize your look, but then to also optimize everything else about you too, whether that's your diet or your fitness or your sleep routine or your hormone levels or, your supplement stack or whatever else it is that's going on in your world. All of those things are what it means to be a man. Look, not all of those things are bad. There's certainly things there that are worth enjoying, and some of them that are really worth pursuing to try to be the best men that we possibly can be. But let's be really clear that none of those things are at the essence of what it means to be a man. Some of those things can and should be important, but they aren't really what being a man is all about. Okay, so let's reject that out of hand, and we definitely should reject the kind of toxic masculinity culture that does go along with that just says that being a man is kind of all about self-promotion and making this kind of image of myself into being this like super cool machismo sort of guy. None of that is worth anybody's time, and anybody who's not those YouTubers would watch those videos and probably be able to say, these guys are just a bunch of douchebags. Why am I paying attention to them? And that's really the case. Okay, so we're not going to follow them. We're not paying attention to that definition. We're going to look in some other places. But if you do go looking in some other places, you are likely to find some things that might actually sound a little bit more helpful. So you might find people who talk about being a man in terms of the roles that a man should fulfill. And when you look at these things, you're going to get ideas like being a protector, being a provider, being a procreator, right? In that sense, being a presider, meaning kind of leading or even governing over, whether that's a family or a community or whatever, those things are part of a man's role. If you come from a church background like I do, you might hear that a man's roles are really all about being a husband, being a father, being a leader in your family and in your community. Again, none of these things are bad. In fact, most of those things are really good. They are positive and affirming things that we can say about being a man. But I don't think that those things are really the essence of what it means to be a man. They are related to that, but they really are about the functions of a man. They aren't necessarily what it means to be a man. We need to get a little bit more closer to the essence of a man and not just really kind of about the purpose of a man in order to understand our idea of manhood. Okay, so you can look at it in terms of roles, but that's not quite the direction that I want to go with it. Another way that people tend to look at manhood that I want to say is not bad, but also not the direction that I want to go in, would be looking at manhood in terms of some ideas of what we would call virtues. Okay, this is stuff like character traits that we think are what make a man good. And these might be things like trustworthiness or integrity or chivalry, anything like that that describes the loyalty of a man. All of those things are really good. They are virtues that have been held up in most societies throughout the world, throughout history, and they have been seen and proven to be really good things. They make a man good. They help him to be able to contribute in worthwhile ways, both to his closest relationships like his family, but also to his community as a whole. However, while all of that is good, what it doesn't tell us about is just simply how to be a man. It tells us how to be a good man, but it doesn't tell us how to be a man. It's really getting the cart before the horse. And again, as someone who comes from a church background, this is one of the ways that I think the church has really failed men in terms of captivating the minds and the hearts of men in congregations, is that we put forth a vision of what it means to be a good man without ever actually talking to men about what does it mean to be a man? How do we do that? And how do we do it well? A good man isn't just about being a loyal husband and a present and caring father, although those things are fantastic. Men who are husbands and fathers should strive towards being those things. But that's not the essence, again, of what it really means to be a man. Okay? So if we're not talking about roles, and if we're not talking about virtues, what do we want to talk about when it comes to what it means to actually be a man? So here at Manhood Tribes, you're going to hear me talk about this a lot. I use what I call the 5 marks of manhood to help put some parameters around what it means to be a man. Now, the 5 marks of manhood are what I would call traits. They aren't really virtues because they're not necessarily positive or negative things. They're just traits. They're characteristics of what has mostly been true of men throughout culture, throughout history, throughout most places and times. Whenever you see men in those cultures, you're likely to see these traits kind of clumped together around what it looked like to be a man in all of those places. Now, there may have been some other things in addition to the 5 that I'm going to name in certain places and at certain times, but these 5 have tended to be pretty universal in almost all cultures and times throughout history. So, what are those 5 marks of manhood? Are you ready? Here we go. The 5 marks of manhood are strength, courage, skill, honor, and allegiance. Okay, let me say them again one more time. The 5 marks of manhood are strength, courage, skill, honor, and allegiance. I believe that these 5 traits are things that all men should possess in order to demonstrate what it means to be a man. These are the ways that men show what being a man really is all about. They are the things that you should possess as a man, and they are things that you should be growing and getting better at over the course of your time as a man. So let's talk about them just briefly right now, but in future episodes, we're going to take a deep dive into each one of the 5 marks of manhood and really expound on it more significantly so that you guys can get a picture of what do those things look like and how do I grow and get better at each of them, okay? But let's start with just the basic first one, which is strength. And really, I think strength is kind of the foundational mark of what it means to be a man. When we're talking about strength here at Manhood Tribes, we're primarily talking about physical strength. So yes, there is such a thing of mental strength, of toughness, of fortitude, and that's a good thing. But we're primarily going to be talking here about physical strength. It is the thing, I think, that is the differentiator about what it means to be a man as compared to what it means to be a woman. Now, both men and women can be strong, but men's bodies, literally, biologically, are built for strength. It is one of the essential things that men in almost every culture and civilization have offered to the world around them is their physical strength, because our bodies are just made for it. That is how we are designed. That's how our frame, our musculature, our skeletons, everything about the way that we are wired and built is made for being able to have and to use and to offer strength to the world around us. So, in order to really possess this characteristic of physical strength, men need to be working on it. This is something as a man that you need to be able to offer to the world around you. You should be able to just kind of basically go throughout your day doing the normal things that you need to do and have enough strength to do all of those things without getting winded, right? You need to possess that kind of strength as a man. That's sort of just like baseline, basic level strength. But you also need to be able to have the strength in order to be called upon for other kinds of exceptional activities, whether that's an emergency or just your friend who's moving across town needs some help loading and unloading his furniture. Whatever that looks like, you need to be able to have the strength to do it, and that is part of the essence of what it means to be a man. The second one is courage. Courage is really just about facing our fears and moving towards them. It's not about not having fears, because that's not realistically possible. Pretending to not have fears is one of those kind of machismo things that, teenage guys do and YouTubers do. It's just not really a thing. All of us have fears and we need to acknowledge it. What makes you a man is not that you might be afraid of something. It's that you're willing to move towards that fear and attempt to overcome it. Courage is at the heart of what it means to be a man. The third thing is skill. Every man needs to be counted on for some skills that he has where he can contribute to the world around him. Now, as all men kind of know, the older that we get and as we move into adulthood, we kind of have to become like Swiss Army knives. We have to be a little bit of a jack of all trades and know how to do a whole lot of things. You need to know how to be able to read a map. You need to know how to change a tire. You need to know how to shoot a free throw. You need to know how to grill a hamburger. There's lots and lots of skills that as men, it's just helpful for us to know how to do all of those kinds of things. But in addition to just kind of some general jack of all trades knowledge, you also need to really hone your skills in some certain areas so that you can contribute at more of an expert level in some ways. Not in a lot of ways, but in a handful of ways, you need some advanced knowledge and some advanced skill to be able to offer to the world. That's how you contribute value, and that's how you make the world better around you. Men need to possess and to offer their skills. Okay, now of these first three that I've talked about, all of those things are traits that men can kind of work on for themselves individually. You can grow in strength and in courage and in skill really all on your own. You can practice those things by yourself. You can set goals for yourself in those areas, and you can get better at those things through your own individual effort. But these last two marks of manhood, honor and allegiance, are inherently relational. You cannot grow in honor and allegiance without relationships, especially with other men. So let's talk about what that means. Honor is really about kind of our horizontal relationships. And what I mean by that is our peer level relationships, our friends. Honor is really about doing right by your peers. It is about having a group around you who you share their values with, and you live in such a way as to try to do right by those people and those shared values. That's what honor means. It's not quite this like newer version that we use of honor that means something more like integrity or having high character. Again, that's not a bad thing, but that's not really what honor is all about. Honor is about doing right by your friends. And that can mean, again, because the marks of manhood are morally neutral, they're not really good or bad. That can mean that if you have chosen your friends poorly, that you can be high on honor, meaning you're doing right by this group of friends, but you're making really bad choices in doing that. You could be doing really, really bad things because that's what that group of people values. And so you're making poor choices even though you're upholding the idea of honor. So we can kind of see that being a man just means that you've got a group of people who you share some values with, and you're upholding those values. But if you choose those people poorly, you're going to be making really poor choices in the way that you live your life. Allegiance looks somewhat similar, but is really more about those vertical relationships. It's about how we relate to authority. Now, as a younger man, this might mean things like your parents or your coaches or your teachers. And as an older man, it becomes more things like your bosses at work, and even people like law enforcement and governmental authorities that you might have to relate to. It also has an ultimate aspect to it that relates to how you have a relationship with your God or whatever the ultimate authority is in your life that you choose to follow. All of that is about allegiance, and it really is trying to say that all men are going to follow something. And we've got to figure out, are we being a good follower, and is what we have chosen to follow actually helping us to become the kind of man that we want to be? Okay, so that's a brief overview of the 5 marks of manhood. Again, strength, courage, skill, honor, and allegiance. All men should possess those things as a way to demonstrate what it means to be a man. You can possess them and demonstrate them in ways that are good and in ways that are bad. The 5 marks of manhood don't make you a good man. They make you good at being a man. Now, we do want to talk eventually about how to be a good man, because that is important, and I think it's what most of us who want to be extraordinary men want to be like. But that comes in terms of some of how we make those choices and what we give ourselves over to, which aren't necessarily the essence of what it means to be a man. Okay, so the 5 marks of manhood are morally neutral. They are things that all men should possess, and this is maybe one of the most important parts. And especially for you guys who are out there who might be wrestling with, am I a man? What does it mean to be a man? How would I know if I am one? Everything about the 5 marks of manhood suggests that we can get better at each of those things. So if you're at a place in your life right now where you're feeling particularly unmanly, and even as I listed off some of those things, you might be thinking to yourself, well, I'm not really very strong. I'm actually kind of pretty out of shape in my life right now, and I don't have a lot of courage. I know what my fears are, and I'm a little bit paralyzed by them. I'm not really willing to move towards them. I don't have friends. I'm not doing well at honor. I don't relate well to my bosses, and I don't really have much of a faith, so allegiance is kind of like out the window for me. Like, if that's you sitting there thinking, I don't really measure up in any of those ways, I'm not doing well at any of those things, that's okay. That's actually okay, because now you at least have some clarity around what it does mean to be a man, and you know that you can get better in all of those aspects. You can become better at being a man by challenging yourself and by growing in each of those different ways. So that's one of the things that we're going to talk regularly about here on the Manhood Tribe Show, is how to develop manhood challenges, how to create some tasks for yourself to be able to get better in each of those 5 marks of manhood. And as we get past this kind of introductory few episodes here on the Manhood Tribe Show, you're going to hear me talk about manhood challenges, things that you can do to get better at being a man. And you just design them around each of those 5 marks of manhood to help you become better at being skilled, or at having honor, or at working on your allegiance to the authority figures in your life. All of those things are possible. We're going to talk a whole lot about them and how to be able to do those things well and how to design them. But Here at Manhood Tribes, we are trying to help you develop into an extraordinary man. And if we're going to do that, we've got to recognize that one of the most essential ingredients in making that happen is that you need a group of men around you to help you get there. Of the 5 marks of manhood, perhaps the one that in our culture we are having the hardest time with right now is honor. It's that aspect of relating to our peers. And it's not because we poorly relate to our peers. It's because for the most part, we just don't have peers. As men, we don't really have other close men in our lives who are helping us and challenging us to become the kind of men that we really do want to be. So if you want to become an extraordinary man, you're going to have a transformational group of men around you. And that is what we call a tribe. Manhood Tribes is really all about developing, learning how to develop that transformational group of men around you. So as we get ready to move into this next episode and kind of the final episode in our introduction to Manhood Tribes, we need to talk about what is a tribe. Why do you need one, and how do you cultivate one in your life? So I look forward to talking to you again in our next episode where we're going to dive into that topic and really explore the whole idea of, when it comes to manhood tribes, what really is a tribe and why do you need it? I'll look forward to talking to you next time here on the Manhood Tribes Show. We'll see you then.